Hello and welcome to Restoration DIY. In this episode, I'll be making a bowl using the scrap offcuts from my previous Applewood projects. It seemed a waste to throw them away, and I wanted to try a new piece of kit. So without further ado, let's get into it. After arranging the offcuts in the casting bucket, I mixed the first of 3 batches of epoxy resin, same as usual at a ratio of 2:1. This was mixed for 2 minutes before the colouring was added. I chose yellow for this project, something nice and bright for summer. I added a dash of yellow alcohol dye and a heavy dash of yellow mica powder. This was then mixed for a further 2 minutes. And with the 3 batches mixed, I poured them into the casting bucket. Then it was time for the new piece of kit. I've invested in a vacuum or degassing chamber. With this, I'm hoping to get a better casting in porous timber, like this Applewood, which is full of woodworm holes. With the casting safely inside, I placed a 20mm thick acrylic lid on top and began pumping the air out. Initially I thought it was faulty, but a gentle squeeze down on the silicone seal and it began to work. The maximum vacuum rating is 29 inches. I took it to about 20 inches and peered inside. Bubbles, lots of bubbles, it was working. I left it for a couple of minutes and then released the vacuum. With the lid off and the weight removed, I could see the resin was at a lower level, so I presumed the timber had taken a lot of the resin. I used a small blowtorch to pop the bubbles and added another batch of resin, gave it one more go in the vacuum chamber and put it in the pressure pot. So with the usual 50 to 55 psi added to the pot, I left it overnight to cure. It's a few days later, and off camera I added 2 more batches of resin to the casting to cover all the timber. By doing 2 separate pours, I was hoping to avoid any overheating cracks, which plagued my last project. I marked the centre and drilled an 8mm hole. Then I mounted the blank on the lathe, making sure to use the tailstock for extra security, and with that done, I began turning it down to round. As with all my other resin projects, I began with the Easywood Tools mid-size finisher, complete with negative rate scraper. This blank has been stood for about 48 hours, so the resin was nicely cured and the cutter removed material with ease. Once the blank was balanced, I was able to turn up the speed and go to town on getting it to shape. Now this is where I have to talk about the final design. I started with the intention of this being a flat bottom vase, but as I got into it, I just wasn't feeling it, so I decided on a pedestal bowl. This was partly driven by how the wood was emerging from the resin. The tear out was getting quite bad, so I broke out the large negative rate scraper, and this cleared it up straight away. And after this I didn't have any more issues with tear out. The best I can tell is the resin had impregnated the porous Applewood and effectively stabilised it when it had been in a vacuum. Having made the decision on the shape, I took a freshly sharpened bowl gouge and formed the pedestal. It goes without saying, the The more I used this, the easier it gets, and the timber was cutting so easily, it was a joy to do. I worked at shaping the outside of the bowl, and I was going to form a pinched waist, the same as on my other bowls. But I decided to make a small change, and I went for a tapered profile on the midsection, blended into the cutout just above the base. Once the basic shape was done, I used the large negative rate scraper and the carbide cutter to blend and fair all the curves. There were a few voids I would need to fix, but I decided to move on to forming the mortise in the base and deal with them later. This time I decided to take a different approach to the mortise. I flattened the base first, then I roughly formed the mortise with a bowl gouge before using a dovetail cutter to define the finished recess. The carbide cutter came in handy to fine-tune the base. I used it to slightly hollow out the underside so the bowl would sit nicely on the rim of the pedestal. With the final shaping of the mortise completed, I moved on to sanding the outside from 80 to 240 grit, then began the task of filling the small voids. I used black Starbond superglue to fill the voids with an activator to cure the glue quickly so it didn't run all over the bowl. This is a new process to me, and for a start it wasn't working, but once I worked out that I needed to let the glue cure a couple of minutes, then sand it down with a sanding pad in a drill with the workpiece stationary, it all went smoothly. Sadly I didn't capture any video of me sanding it with the drill, so you'll have to take my word for it. In the next clip, I'm attempting to use the negative rate scraper to remove the excess glue, which sort of worked, but power sanding was the way to do it. How does it go? I make the mistakes so you don't have to. You're welcome. With the voids filled, I finished sanding all the way up to 3000 grit. Then I cleaned down with denatured alcohol, followed with a thorough soaking in sanding sealer, which I denibbed with a non-abrasive scotch pad. Yorkshire Grit abrasive paste was up next. This has two functions. Firstly, to remove the heavier scratches in the acrylic, and to add a finish to the Applewood. This is all polished off with paper towel. Swiftly followed up with Yorkshire Grit fine abrasive paste, 2 coats. This also removes scratches and polishes the acrylic, and it contains mineral oils and beeswax to add finish to the wood. Next up, the two Novus products. First, the fine scratch remover, applied liberally and cleaned off with more paper towel. Then the plastic clean and shine. That's the outside finished, and I'm very happy with it. Next was hollowing out the inside, and as usual, it was a straightforward process, so I'm not going to talk through it. Sit back and listen to the music. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Moments of anger I never show. I hope you know, buried in silence till all explodes. I hope you know, fears are rising, climbing walls, broken spirits. I hope you know, the raging anger, sense of blame. I hope you know, fears of feelings drive me away. Fingers crossing and now on my way. So falling, flawless, so beautiful. I hope you know the flower you taken an angel. I hope you know nights are restless, grueling pain, thoughts are killing me. I hope you know, the raging anger, sense of blame. I hope you know, fears of feelings drive me away. Fingers crossing now on my way. Where is my understanding? Where is your sense of mercy?
Final fine-tuning with a skew chisel and a large negative rate scraper, and it was ready for sanding from 80 to 3000 grit. Then finished as before, beginning with a clean down with denatured alcohol, followed by sanding sealer denibbed with a non-abrasive Scotch pad. Single application of Yorkshire grit, cleaned away with paper towel, then Yorkshire grit fine abrasive paste, 2 coats, again cleaned away ready for the Novus fine scratch remover. Final polish, and that's it finished. I hope you like this one. I'm really happy with it. The way the yellow resin appears to be running through the applewood like rivers of lava in a rocky landscape is a bonus. And with that, if I could ask you to give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and comments are always welcome. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.